What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Coffee and Coding, where we drink coffee while we write code. So let's go ahead and get into today's tutorial. Oh man, coffee is just absolutely delicious. So before we begin, there's a couple things I want to change here. A couple people said that the font's really hard to read because it's so small. So let's just go and bump it up a size or two. Let's just go up one, and let me know if this is good enough. If you want it bigger next video, let me know in the comments. If not, we'll just leave it here. Now again, guys, this video is going to be long. This isn't just a quick tutorial on, oh, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? This is not a 2-minute tips video. It's not a 10-minute tips video. This is going to be a series where we teach you guys the fundamentals of what we're doing, and then I show you how to do it. That way, I'm not just showing you code that you retype yourself and can do. I'm showing you what we're doing and why we're doing it so that you understand why we're doing it, so that in the future, you know how to do it on your own. Now, as always, when you're watching these videos, there are two very important rules to live by. First rule is, rule number one, have your coffee ready, because coders need coffee. That's why they both start with the same two letters, C-O. Coffee, code. Now, rule number two is just as important. It is actually probably a little more important, and that is leave your opinions at the door. Everybody has an opinion. We've been over this in the last episode, but I always mention it because there's always someone that's gonna be like, oh, you should use, lowercase letter first and then uppercase letter, or, instead of calling it this variable, you should name it that. Now, if I say something that's wrong or incorrect, then definitely let me know. That is how I learn. Everything that I've done has always been self-taught, so I like to learn. So if there's something that I'm doing wrong and I say something incorrectly, definitely let me know. Now, in the last video, I talked about the Spigot Api and how they open up all of the server core functionality and stuff that we can use in our plugin. And I kind of gave the example of like the ice cream vendor, of us saying like, hey, I want an ice cream cone. Well, I don't want to know how to make the cone. I don't want to know how to make the ice cream and the sprinkles. I just go to the ice cream vendor and he says, okay, here you go. Here's everything that you asked for. And that was referring specifically to the API functionality. I don't need to know how to make ice cream and do all that stuff. I just say, hey, shut up and give me my ice cream. The ice cream vendor says, here it is. So the ice cream vendor in that case was the API. They hand me back the ice cream. Now, the little piece that I forgot to plug in there is that technically I still need to know what ice cream is. Like, how can I order an ice cream cone if I don't know what an ice cream cone is? So from that aspect, in order for me to know what an ice cream cone is, something has to tell me. And that is what the library kind of does. So like a library is basically a set of code that tells you, what something is. It's classes, it defines stuff. Now, sometimes libraries can also include the functionality of making the ice cream. So you could have a library that you have access to that basically will churn out the ice cream, it'll make the cones, and it'll give me the instructions on how to do all that stuff. Now that stuff can be packaged into a library so that we can do that all ourselves. Now the API is a little bit different. We use the library to tell us what ice cream is so that we know that, hey, I want an ice cream cone with sprinkles. And that's as far as we go, though. We know what ice cream is. We have no idea how it's made or where it comes from. And that's where the API then sends us back the fully prepared ice cream cone and gives us all that information and gives us our polished ice cream. Now, like I said, technically, a library and an API are very similar. An API is a library, but not every library is an API. It's kind of confusing, and we'll try to cover that in a little bit, but I did want to clarify that in case anybody was confused. Now, with that said, we are going to continue on our tutorial path. As you can see here, we've got our plugin from last time. And if you remember, in order to build this, we just have to go to Run As, Maven Install, and it will go through and build a version of the plugin that we can actually load into our server. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the path that is in, open the window, and here's our jar. Tutorial 1, version 1.0.0. If I copy that jar and put it into my server directory, into the plugins folder, paste it in there, we should now be able to run our server. This is a 1.17 server. Eventually I'll switch it to 1.18 soon. But now our server is going to start up, and as long as everything goes well, we should be able to see our plugin loaded. And we should be able to see our little debug lines where it says starting up and shutting down. Now I typed PL, and you can see that it says tutorial 1 is green. Green means it is loaded properly. So our plugin is now loaded on the server. And if we read right here in chat, it says starting up, startup complete. Now, if we type stop, then we should very quickly see right there, shutting down, shutdown complete. Now, those are our two messages: starting up, startup complete, shutting down, shutdown complete. So that's all our plugin does right now, is it prints those messages to chat. Now, obviously, we want to do a little bit more with our plugin than just displaying a couple messages. And that's where we're going to begin. But first of all, what I want to do is this logging routine here is kind of big. I mean, there's kind of a lot of stuff you need to know. You need to call the logger, you need to log it, level info, or whatever level you want. But I think what we can do is we can make this logging routine a little bit better. And logging is critical to the development of plugins. Not just because you always want to have a written log of stuff that happens, but it is a crucial step when you're trying to debug something that's not working properly. And that's why one of the first classes I always have, and actually, in fact, this is a class that I literally copy and paste to every project, because every project I make needs logging. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own logger. So I'm just going to create a new class, logger. And inside of this, we're going to create a few routines. Now, this class we're going to make very generic. You could literally click on this file, copy it, paste it into a new project. And if you ever need to update it in any of your other projects, if you're like, oh, I could do this, it'd be a little bit better, you can go and replace that file. And there's a lot of functionality you can add that will share between multiple projects. Now, technically, you can make an entire logging project and, you know, have it as its own standalone library and stuff. And yeah, sure, you could do that. But for a logging class, it's super simple, at least the way we're going to use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this line here, and we're going to turn this into a routine inside of the logging class. Now, we need to kind of explain something here before we go ahead and just jump into this, and it's going to be functions and methods. So what that means is there's two ways you can call routines within your code. There is a method and there is a function. A method just says, hey, I need you to do this task, and that's it. I don't need anything in return. A function is, hey, I need you to do this task, but I want this in return. Let me give you a quick example of that. Let me just comment this out real quick so we can not have any errors in the project. And we're gonna go back over to this thing, and we're gonna delete this in a second. I just want to show you the difference between a method and a function. So let's say we have static int x, and I will explain this in a second as well. X equals 0, and then we're going to have a void, which is a void return type. It returns nothing, so it's just literally a method. And we're going to say add number. We're also going to make this static as well. Actually, we're going to change this to add numbers. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass a number into here that we're going to use. So we're just going to call this int, let's just call it z, because, you know, this is just an example. Obviously, we already know that we should give more descriptive names, but what we're going to do here is we're just going to take these two variables, and I want to add this number to this number. Now, I could just say x plus equals z, and plus equals means it'll add, and then set x equal to z. I mean, we could just say x plus z, but then it's going to say, well, what do you want me to do with that? We could create a new integer, a equals x plus z. You guys are getting a little confused. So let's just say x plus equals z. Basically, all this is going to do is it's going to take the incoming number z and add it to the current value of x. Now, if we want to give this some more meaning, again, code is easier to read when you have proper variables. So if we say total donations, now we have $0 in donations, and instead of add number, add donation. So what we're going to do here is we are going to take the number here, and we are going to call this, instead of z, we're going to call it donation amount. So we're going to take this donation amount, and we're going to add it to the total donations number. So now we could call this and say, hey, I need you to go through, whenever I get a donation, I'm going to send you how much it is, and I want you to add it to the total. Now, technically, we shouldn't be using integers. This assumes that you're going to always have even dollar values. If you wanted to be proper, you could use floats and just have it a floating point integer. So we could do that. So now you could have cents in there. But this is a method. This just says, hey, I'm going to give you a number, and I need you to do something with it. So in this case, this method says, hey, I'm going to take the donation amount and add it to the total. Done. That method is done. We don't need anything back. We're just saying, hey, I got a donation. Cool. Handle that donation. So now we have a method that just literally adds money to the total donations received. But what if we wanted to do something special if it was a big enough amount? Let's say we want to play a sound every time we get a donation over a certain value. So what we could do is we put in an if statement that says if donation is over required amount, then do something here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass in the donation amount, and we need to create a function that tells us, well, did this amount donated actually cross the threshold of, playing that sound? So what we're going to do is we're going to static boolean, and then the name of that method there. This is pretty long, but it's also very descriptive. And you can see, even though we put it in here, it's angry. And it's angry because it's expecting to return a boolean. So what we could do is just return false. Now this is happy, but this is still angry. That's because we don't have the donation amount coming in. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna copy paste that from here to here, and now everything is happy. So we're just gonna say play sound here. We're not gonna actually put the code in to play the sound because we're not that far in the tutorial yet. But right now this is only ever going to return false. So what we need to do is put in some logic here that says if donation amount is greater than, let's just say $5, then we play our sound. So we're gonna say return true. Now how this is gonna work is, actually we could, maybe we want greater than or equal. So at $5 or more, it will play the sound. It could be like a creeper exploding, it could be a gas, it could be whatever you want. But how this works now is, instead of just saying, hey, add this total donation amount to our total, and that's it, I don't care what happens afterwards, we needed something to tell us, well, should we actually play the sound? So in that case, we needed a function that goes through and says, hey, I'm going to tell you whether or not you should play that sound. And in order to do that, we have to have it return something. So in this case, we're returning a Boolean, whether it's going to be true or false. Now, the return statement, once it hits return, it exits that function. So even though you're probably like, well, if it's true, it's going to do that, but then it's going to jump out and go to the false, and it's going to return both of them. Well, functions can only return one item. Well, I mean, you can make a list of items, but it's only going to return one object. So once it hits return, it's not going to continue executing the rest of this code in here. It's just going to say, is the donation amount greater than or equal to $5? Just say a dollar comes in, it's going to say, is it greater than or equal to $5? No. So it's going to skip over this bracketed section and return false. So then the question is the donation amount over the required amount? And you could even call it to play sound if you want to be super descriptive. There are better ways to do this, but just for the sake of you guys watching, now we know, is the donation amount, actually it should probably be, is donation over required amount to play sound. So if it is greater than or equal to $5, it's going to return true, in which case it's going to come in here and play our sound. If it goes into this and says, is it greater than or equal to, and it's $1, it's going to return false. It's going to say, nope, it is not true. So it's going to not go into this thing, and it's going to skip past this bracketed section. Now, let's say you wanted to play two different sounds. Maybe if they donate less than $5, you want to play one sound, and if it's over $5, you want to play a different one. Well, that's when your else statement comes in, and it says, well, if the donation amount is over $5 or equal to $5, then play this sound, and if not, then play the other sound here. So maybe one's a creeper and one's a ghast, or one's an ender dragon and one's an explosion. So, I mean, there's many ways you could do that, but this is the difference between a method, which is just, I don't care what you do, just add this, just run this code. I don't need anything returned. Just run this. Add this donation to the total. Do whatever you need to do. I don't need anything back. I just want to let you know that I'm giving you a donation. And then inside here, we have our function that this cares about. It says, well, hey, I want to play a sound if it's over a certain amount. So then we need to know, is it over that amount? Now, technically, you could also just copy this code into here, and it would do the exact same thing. It would play the sound here and there. This is also right. But if you're going to use this code in multiple sections of your project, then it's better to keep it into its own routine. So a better way to do this could also be to take this same thing and say handle donation amount, and we don't even need this if then up here. We could literally call this guy here, change this from a function that returns a Boolean to a method that doesn't return anything. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this if statement and put this guy just like we did above. So now, handle donation amount, we're going to rename this to handle donation amount. And in here, we're just going to say play sound and play sound here, play other sound. So exactly the same, 3 different ways to kind of write the exact same thing. You know, now in this case, we don't have a function because it's just handling it in here. And why not? So again, this is 3 different ways to do the exact same thing. So this is why rule number 2 is always don't give me your opinion on things, because there's so many ways to redo the exact same thing and they're all going to work and they will all work in their own way. And yes, there could be problems with some, the other one could cause issues, but if it works, it works. So that is why rule number 2 is so important, guys. We literally just saw me do the same thing 3 different ways, and you know, they're all correct. So now that we kind of talked about methods and functions, that's kind of gonna come up in future topics, but again, it's one of those things that you need to understand from the beginning. And I want to talk about static and non-static methods and variables and all that stuff, but that's even a little more advanced. So that's gonna probably be one of the next videos. This video, we're just gonna just follow along, and you know, I'll try to explain it as best I can, but we'll have like an entire episode on that because it is very difficult to explain without knowing some other concepts beforehand. Anyways, back to our logging program. What we want to do is we want to make it simpler to log stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a public static void log message. And what we can do is we're going to take this code, paste it back into there, and now we have a logging routine that will log this string here, starting up. Well, we need it to be a little more dynamic than just typing starting up, so we're going to call, we're going to create a variable here that says string log message. So we're going to take that log message and put it right in here. And now, instead of on here having to do bucket.getLogger.log, log level info, starting up, we can actually replace all of this with logger.logMessage. And now, all we're passing it is the message that we want to log. So again, we can just copy this, replace all this stuff with our simple log message, and there we go. Now notice up here, these things have little yellow squiggles in it. That means we're importing code sections that we're not actually using anywhere. So we can just go ahead and safely delete those. So our code just got a little simpler. And now we have a logging class. But let's say we wanted to have different levels of logging based on different events. Now, if we click into this level, if you hold control, you can click into other parts of code. So this here is showing you how everything works. So right now we chose to use the info level, which is kind of closer to the top. So this is levels of severity in your code. So severe and warning, I believe in console have a different color. So severe, I think, will be red. Warning is orange. Info, I think, is just white. And then this stuff is, you know, config, fine, finer, finest. You can have multiple levels of logging that do different things. That way you could set a flag to say, well, I don't care about any of the fine, finer, finest logging. I don't need to see that in my console all the time. Maybe occasionally when you're troubleshooting something, you want to see that. But for the most part, I only really want to see info, warning, and severe. So that's kind of why they have so many levels here. And we're going to kind of do the same thing in our code here. So we've got our log message routine here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it in twice. And I'm going to rename one of them to log warning. And I'm going to rename the other one to log error. I call it log error. They call it severe. but you know, we can call it whatever we want. It's our code. So this one we're going to change to level.severe, and this one we're going to change to level.warning. So now we have in our logging class, we have 3 different methods that we can call that will either log a message, it'll log a warning, or it'll log an error. And to see how these things work, let's go ahead and let's just put this in our on enable. So we've got log message, and we're going to change this one to this is a warning, and this one is going to be called this is an error. And the only difference is we call them separately, so log warning, and this one we're going to change to log error. So now if we go ahead and we run our project, it's going to fail. Because again, every time you add a new class or anything, it always fails the first build. Again, I don't know why it does this. It just does. Just literally run it a second time and it will work. So now we can actually go back into our folder where we have our jar. We're going to paste it into tutorials, overwrite the existing, or into plugins, overwrite our existing tutorial. And technically, that's fine. I think what we should do though is, since we did make a small change, we're going to version it, so we know that something actually changed. So we're going to change it from version 100 to 101. And now we're actually going to rerun this again. Will it fail? No, it didn't actually fail. But we need to remember this stuff. So here is one of the tricky things, and this has actually caused me a few problems in the past. I go, okay, cool, let me copy this, put it back in here, boom. Now our code should be updated. But when you change the version number, this is still version 100. You actually have to go back and go into the 101 folder and then paste the 101 in. Now Spigot usually will take the newer versions and automatically load it. But it is possible if you had both of these in the folder, it would load this one first and then ignore that one. So we have to make sure we delete the 100. But now, if we go into our server and run it, this always takes a while to start up because it is the newer version of Minecraft. Also, I had to add more cores to my machine because it was just a little bit slow. Great time for a coffee break. So once it's done loading in the nether, the overworld, the end, it's going to log some stuff here. So starting up, warning, and error. I know maybe it's probably because I'm just using the server version. I know normally our server versions will actually color code things, but you can see now that we have all these info level logging entries here. And this says starting up, and then we have our warning, and this is a warning, and an error, this is an error. So here it doesn't really jump out at you too much, but it actually makes a big difference because most of the time you're not looking at console. You go, if you have an issue, you have to go back and look at logs. So if we go in the logs folder and we edit our latest.log, we can come in here and let's just see, is there any match for error? And look at that, this is an error. So this makes it a lot easier to debug stuff when you have these entries in there. Now, if your wording is proper, you can actually always search for that. Having the word error in there in the log level will give you something easy to search for. You can just look for /error and it'll find that. And if you want to see, are there any warnings, you just type search for /warn. This lets you go through a log entry that might have thousands of rows. Now, this one is relatively small. It's only got 161, but you got a lot of plugins and stuff in there. It can get busy very fast. So we have a logging class that allows us to do different things, including log warnings and log errors. And I did promise we would do some stuff in this plugin today. So obviously, like, creating the logger is kind of giving you a little bit better insight into how to break some of your tasks apart. While you could just copy and paste these lines all throughout your code, it's a lot easier to do this. Because normally if you're just calling this directly, that's all it's gonna do. But let's say we wanted to do something else here. Maybe if there is a severe enough error, you want to email yourself or insert a row into a database saying, hey, we have this error, someone needs to follow up on it. So you could actually now take this error method and we could go in here and say, send text message. Now, obviously send text message is not a real routine, but we could pass in the log message and we could send a text to ourselves or send email message or whatever you want to do. And you can do extra functionality. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I will create a logging routine, because it allows you to expand on that code later on without having to go back through. Because if we had this everywhere in our code, then everywhere that we had this severe logging thing, we would have to go through and change that to call, we'd have to add that second, send text message everywhere that you had that. And that's why it just makes so much more to have some of that stuff in your routines. Again, I copied and pasted from the other page, so added those back in. If you ever see little yellow boxes on your code over here, then that means, let me save that so you can see a little exclamation mark is saying, hey, there's something in there that's not right. Now, if there's an error, then it will have a little red X, meaning, hey, something's wrong in that code. And if it's a little yellow exclamation mark, it means that something's either deprecated or something's going on in there. It's not gonna break your code, but it shouldn't be there. Now, we want to do something with our plugin. So let's actually start developing some stuff for this plugin. Let's make this do something. And one of the main things that you're gonna need in your plugin is the ability to handle commands. Now, not all plugins need the ability to handle commands, but it is a great thing to have because most plugins, there are things that you do want to be able to run. So just like we have our on enable and on disable, those are methods that we are allowed to override from the Spigot API. We're also going to add a third one now, which is going to be another override, public boolean on command. Now there's a few things in here that we need. First of all, we need a command sender. And by default, it doesn't know who the command sender is. So we're gonna hold Control, hit space, and it's gonna pop up this little menu here. And we're gonna hit enter, and it will now import the org.bucket.command to command sender. And we're gonna call that the sender. It's the sender object. Next, we need the actual command, which is going to be the org.bucket.command. We will call this command, because that is going to be the command object. We need a string str label and a string array that we're going to call args. Now, just to get this to not have any issues, real quick, we're just going to return true. And now, technically, we are overriding the command routine. Now, technically, again, we could go through here and say if command.getName.equals ignore case, and we could put in, whatever command we're looking for. We're going to actually move this into its own class, just like we did for the logging class. So we're going to create a new class, and we're going to call it command manager. And now we have a command manager class. And basically what we need to do is we need to copy this entire routine, paste it in here, and we're going to rename this to something more useful like handle incoming command. Copy this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this handle incoming command, and we're going to come back in here, and instead of just returning true, what we're going to do is return the command manager dot handle incoming command, and we're going to pass it in the sender, the command, the str label, and the args. Now we also have to go back through here and make this static. So we're going to make the public static boolean handle incoming command, and then we're going to do stuff in here. Now, actually, what you want to do is, by default, you want to return false. If you return false, it tells the bucket subsystem that whatever command you tried to run wasn't properly handled by the code. It didn't work, basically. We're not actually doing anything with it. Or, maybe something went wrong. It tells you, it'll reply back with the actual usage of the command. But for now, we're just going to return false. And the reason we're doing that is because while we can technically handle commands here, we don't actually have any commands registered to be able to handle. So let's go ahead and create a command that we want to handle. For that, we're going to have to go into our plugin.yml, and we will edit this. The stupid backup file. Why does it create backup files? I'm sure there's some setting somewhere that says like, oh, you should create backup files when editing stuff. It's probably in Notepad++. Honestly, actually, it probably is. Actually, just did a quick Google settings, backup, and backup on save, none. There we go. Now we'll stop creating those stupid back files. I hate that. But what we need to do is we need to add in a command section. So let's create a command that we want to handle. We'll just do something simple for the sake of this plugin. So we're going to call this command ping. So by typing the word ping : we have now created a command. So technically now we have a ping command, and there are some things that you can define for that command. You could put in Aliases, which is like a shorter version of it. So if we want to put aliases, let's just put the letter P. So now if someone types /P instead of /PING, it will technically allow them to do that. Also, I don't like the tab spacing. I like to have 2 spaces before everything. It kind of keeps it a little more condensed. So we'll go there. Next up is the description. So we're gonna put in the description. This command will ping the server and receive a Pong response. Now, technically, I think a command like this already comes with either like essentials or maybe even just Minecraft by default. I'm not really sure, but we're gonna create our own. For this, we're gonna put a permission of, let's just call this tutorial1.ping. You know, how about that? That way anyone with the ping permission will be able to run this. Now, we'll get more into permissions in a future episode, but for now, we'll just assume that since we're op, we have that permission. The last thing I add down there is the usage, which is how to actually use the command. And for this one, it's just literally as simple as /ping. So now we have our command called ping. So what we're gonna do is go back into our code and we're gonna say if command.getName equals ignore case, because you have to remember, players type this, they might have caps lock on, they might be all lowercase, all capital, maybe it's like capital P, lowercase I, capital N, lowercase g. You never know what they're gonna put in there. So equal ignore case is the best way to do that. And we're going to say, if it's ping, we're going to want to send them a message, but we also want to return true at this point. Because that means we have properly handled this command. We don't need any other plugin to do anything else with it. We're done with it. We don't need to tell them anything was incorrect. We're just going to return true and be done with this routine. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the sender object and we're going to send them a message with the word Pong. There we go. So now when they run /ping, it should respond with Pong. And we now have our command manager. Now, the reason I break this off into its own class is because your command manager can get very large, depending on how many different types of commands that you have and what each of those commands will do. So rather than clogging up your main class with a bunch of useless code, you can break it down to just a couple lines. I mean, technically, line breaks and stuff don't matter. You could put it all on one line like this, but honestly, that makes it too hard to read because then it goes off the page and you can't actually see what's going on. But now we're going to go ahead and run this, and it's going to fail because, well, we've created a command class. So it's going to be like, oh man, I really don't know what you did. I can't compile this. And you run it again, you smack it on the head, and it's like, oh, I know how to compile this. So now we have tutorial 101. And again, since we changed it, technically, since the last one was released into our server, we need to go back through and change to version 102. Now again, like I said, you could keep version 100 forever. It's not going to affect anything. It's one of those things that the bigger your server network gets, the more important versioning and version control is. But for starting off, you really don't need to do that. And I almost made the same mistake. I almost overwrote the file, which would have not worked because, again, we have to go into the 102 folder. Like I said, there were times where I was uploading the same plugin over and over, thinking that it was the new code and being just irate, screaming at the computer, you piece of crap, why are you not working? I changed you, I've added debug entries, it's not working. And then I remember, that's right, I changed the version numbers, which is one of the reasons why some people just don't version their code. I know I used to do that for the longest time, so I'm like, this is stupid. I had that problem happen a couple times, and I was like, I'm never again going to version, and then I realized actually versioning is pretty good. But we're gonna go ahead and start this up. Now, once the server is loaded, you can actually check the version that is running. So if you're like, oh man, did I actually upload the proper version to the server? You don't actually have to go into FTP and pull up the actual files for it. There is a command that you can run in game called, you guessed it, /version. It comes with Spigot on its own. So you can literally type /version and then part of the name of your plugin, and it will reply back with the version that's actually running, which is very handy. So if we type version, now you don't need to type slashes in console, so if you just do type version of tutorial 1, then it says this server is not running any version by that. So I think it's because we called it, if we type PL, actually, we have an issue. plugins loaded 0. Very interesting. Okay, so it is loaded 0 plugins, which is actually a good debugging tip. Let's see what went wrong. If we scroll up here, it's kind of hard to read in here. It kind of formats it all weird. You know, you're looking at this like, what in the hell does this mean? So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the logs folder. It makes it a little easier to read when you edit it with a program like this. So usually the first line is telling you what's going on. So could not load the plugin in the plugins folder, invalid plugin.yml. Okay, let's go ahead and see what we did wrong in the plugin.yml. And by looking at it, you're probably like, everything looks fine. And I'm guessing that this right here, I forgot to have a space. Actually, let me make this a little bigger so you guys can see that as well. I forgot to add a space between the colon and here. And I'm gonna guess that that is the problem. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna copy our plugin back into here. Oops, not from there, into plugins. That would help. I've done that before where I uploaded into the wrong folder and then again I'm screaming at it, why didn't you work? Now the reason I didn't version it here is because this is technically fixing an error. Really what we were doing by adding those extra classes on was probably considered more of a minor change. So this is major versions, minor versions, and then revisions. So technically this would actually have been a better spot for revision. We should actually be on 1.2.1, but you know, it's a little late for that. We're already on 102. And let's just type PL, just you can type plugins, and now tutorial 1 is loaded. So quick little debugging tip there. So there we go. If something doesn't load, it tells you what was wrong. It doesn't, or it tells you where it was wrong. It doesn't tell you exactly what, but knowing how this stuff parses, I did forget the space there. So cool. I'm actually kind of glad I left that there because it did create that small little issue for us. Now, if we go back and type version tutorial 1, oops, tutorial 1, not exclamation mark, it says we're running version 102. So now we know we are running the newest version of the code. And if we type help tutorial, we can get a list of all commands for tutorial 1. Then it says in order to get a list of commands for tutorial 1, all you have to do is type in /tutorial1 : and hit tab and it'll show us the commands. So we can do p, which is the alias for ping, or we can just type in ping. So if we type in tutorial1 : ping, it replies with pong, or if we just type in ping, it replies with pong there. Or we can just type p and run the p command and it replies with pong. Now you're probably like, well, okay, wait a second. Ping, sure. Back in our code, if we type ping, it says, does the command equal ping? Yes, then let's reply pong. But you only typed p. How in the world did that work? Because technically p does not equal ping. Well, if we go back to our plugin.yml and we open this thing up, also associate it with the system editor, stop asking me, even though it's going to ask every time. Technically, p is just an alias. So when you run /p, it knows that you're actually trying to run /ping. So Bucket sees it coming in as the actual command and not the alias. So it knows that you ran ping, so it says the command is still ping, even though you type /p. Now we can do more stuff here, but this is kind of the basis of running commands. So now we have our logging class, which allows us to do stuff here. And it also gives us the ability to run commands. Now, I know there's a lot of stuff covered in this video, lots of different things. I mean, methods versus functions, but at least now you kind of understand that. A method is just something that says, hey, run this code. I don't need anything back. You run it. A function is something that says, hey, I need an answer back on this. So like our logger function is just a bunch of methods that say, do this stuff. Our command function, our command runner, however, it needs something to return back because we're overriding a Boolean, which means this needs to return a Boolean, a true or a false. So when we created our class, it is a function that has to return true or false. And that's kind of why I started off this episode trying to explain the difference between those two things. And that's really all we're going to do in here. But now we have a plugin that starts up and shuts down, has messages that are now logged through our new logging class, which we'll expand on in future videos. But we also have a command manager, which will handle any commands that we give it, which right now we only have the one in our plugin, but obviously you can make it do whatever we want, and we will. Now, if there's certain things you want this plugin to do, make sure to leave a comment because I will take suggestions for things to add. Maybe it's cool things you guys want to see, how it works, do things like that. So I will look into the comments to see what kind of stuff you guys want me to add to this plugin. Now, I've got some ideas in mind of how I want to progress, and some of the more advanced stuff we'll do in the future. But for now, this is kind of where we're going to end this video. I know it's a long video, and it's done that way because I want you guys to learn the basics of doing this stuff. I don't want you just to know, okay, all I have to do is type in on command and I have to type this stuff in there and I just put a big if statement in there. I don't want you to just copy my code. I want you to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it this way so that in the long run, you become a better developer. Now, if you have no interest in becoming a developer, maybe this will spark an interest. And if you are a developer that wants to learn some new stuff, well, it's going to take a little bit because this is going to be a long course. But thank you guys so much for joining me today. Again, leave comments with things that you want to see in the future videos. And if you had fun, make sure to hit the like button. It actually really does help out and helps get this video out there and helps show others some stuff. And I will see you again next time. Make sure to subscribe for more content like this. And I'll see you later. Goodbye, everybody.